Hi there. Have you wondered if you're experiencing a spiritual awakening? We hear that a lot these days. And I wonder if anybody really knows what it quite means. Because a lot of people are going through a lot of changes right now. And it's a very personal experience, it's different for each person. And that phrase gets tossed around a lot. But I want to spend a few minutes and just consider what it might mean for you and how you can kind of live in a space where you're changing and you may not quite know what's going on. And I'm Lori Ingram. I'm a spiritual counselor, and I've been on a spiritual path, much like I'll be talking about, probably for over 12 years now. And just want to share some of my thoughts. So, what awakening really is something very subtle. It doesn't necessarily, for a lot of us, show up with thunderstorm lightning and some grand awakening. For some people it may, but for most of us it's very, very subtle, almost like when a light or a candle goes on in the dark room, or you crack open a door, and the light comes in. We really start to notice things that perhaps we didn't notice before. You might suddenly begin to appreciate nature that's around you. And maybe it's always been there, but you never really looked at it or appreciated it. It could even be a new awareness of energy. So, for example, maybe you're becoming more sensitive when you enter a room of people to feeling, the vibe, so to speak, or the energy of a person you're talking to. And maybe this is a new sensation for you. And really, what is at the root of all this is that something within you is stirring. And that is like an awakening. For some of us, we may feel physical symptoms. Um, it may be something like tingling, sometimes in your hands. You may even get a sensation of feeling the energy off of things, living things, in particular trees, with your hands, or even you may just notice that, you just feel in certain spaces, you just feel more comfortable or more relaxed. You're tuning into the energy of the space you're in physically. Sometimes you may feel a lightness, as if something has been lifted from you, almost like a weight has been lifted from you. Um, Sometimes some of us may feel higher energy, almost buzzing. You hear people talk a lot about frequency. Now, I do believe that everything is energy. Everything has an energetic signature to it, a vibrational signature. So, that vibe that you might be feeling when you walk into a room of people that are very heart centered and joyful, that is something you can feel, as opposed to being in a space maybe where it's a lower energy, or yeah, you can just tell. A little hard to describe sometimes, but these are all sensations that can be surprising to us when we begin to become more aware of them. Some believe this means that our spirit and our body are starting to line up. Um, Vibrationally, there are changes that are happening, and we're going to a higher vibration, which necessarily good or bad to which vibration you're at or aligned with. There really is no good or bad to any of this. There just is. But it's really that awareness of how you might be vibrationally changing. And grounding becomes a very important practice of going out in the woods, on the grass, walking, putting your feet bare on the ground, focusing on your breath. You know, breath exercises and meditation can really help you stay centered when you may feel that your personal energy is shifting. And then our mind. On one hand, we can start to see things with a lot more clarity, um, especially from a spiritual perspective. We suddenly may be aware of patterns in our life. We may be very aware of how we've made decisions in our life, um, that are driven by how we were raised or our situations when we were younger, and that drove patterns and choices in our life that now we can look back on and say, that's an interesting choice that I made, and maybe it wasn't the best choice, but why did I make it, right? So these truths about ourselves become very clear to us. And this for me was one of the probably most profound parts of my own personal spiritual awakening, was being able to look back at my life and say, "Oh, so that's why I made these choices. Okay, I can learn from that, and I can see how I have changed because of that awareness." We also become aware of the interconnectedness of things. We may begin to notice synchronicities. Coincidences? I'm not sure. But when you connect in and your vibration is such that you're starting to align with the universe and your spirit is emerging in a different way, now you begin to see synchronicities of perhaps patterns. These are all things that are just indications that our consciousness is expanding and that we are beginning to connect with all there is. But on the other hand, this can also be confusing because this often means that some of the things we had believed in our life, we now question. If we were religious, for example, or we're in a religious community, we may start to wonder, like, what else is out there? Now, I was raised Catholic. I was always curious about other beliefs and other religions. That led me down the path of exploring, and eventually I did go to a seminary program for 2 years, as well as spiritual counseling, which really opened me up to all the different traditions and faiths that are out there in the world. And there are a lot of them, and they're all fascinating. And now I define myself as spiritual, but I do not align with a particular religion. But that can be disorienting when you perhaps are in a situation where you begin to really question. And ultimately, a lot of us don't really know the answers to a lot of these questions that we ask about why we're here, what is the universe, what is God, what is really happening. We don't necessarily know the answers, but as part of awakening, we begin to connect with what our personal truth is and what we believe. And it can change too. It can change as we become more aware and we deepen our practices and our explorations. And that can cause some confusion. How come something I believed 10 years ago now doesn't make sense to me? And how do I reconcile that? So ultimately, it's about being compassionate with ourselves. We're going through these changes, and always approach with curiosity as well. And I guess at the end of the day, we all have to be comfortable with not knowing and trusting that each step will unfold for us and each piece of knowledge will come to us when we're ready for it. And emotionally, spiritual awakening can open up new emotions for us, right? We might suddenly connect with deep joy when we feel that we are really connected to everybody. It can bring deep joy and peace on one hand, and then perhaps we can also tap into sadness and anger when we are, especially as if we are empathic beings, we can tap into and feel the collective consciousness. So one of the suggestions I make to my clients always, if they're suddenly feeling something and they can't figure out where it came from, ask yourself if it's yours. Because often what we're feeling isn't ours. So having practices of protecting ourselves, protecting our energy, being very aware of how we are feeling and experiencing as opposed to other people, really are practices to help us get to know ourselves better. And as we get to know ourselves better, we can also process emotions that perhaps we haven't addressed or haven't allowed to come to the surface. It's a term many people use. It's like an onion. You're always unpeeling the layers. And just when you think that, oh, I've kind of worked through perhaps a forgiveness exercise with somebody or something in your life, a few years might go by and then something else might come up and bring it back up. So we're always working through these layers, working through these emotions as we live life. So, being gentle with ourselves and also non-judgmental. We're each on such a different path. We really are. We each process and unfold emotions exactly as we are meant to in the perfect time. We really have to be very compassionate with ourselves, and also empathic in a way that we can sense what others are feeling, not taking it on as ours because it's not, but meeting people where they are is also, um, an important practice. At the end of the day, I think this spiritual awakening, air quotes, is really about connection with ourselves, um, our true self, our essence, our spirit, our soul, whatever word you may assign to that, um, which goes beyond the roles we've had in life. It goes beyond the jobs we've had, any of the identities we've had in life. Our true essence is infinite. It is love. It is very powerful. And that is the process of spiritual awakening, is really reconnecting with that we knew before we were born, and that life has kind of piled all these things on, so we can't connect with it all the time. So we begin to shed and get closer and closer to who we are. And whatever you may call that which is greater than us, you may call it God, the universe, source, love, compassion. When you can connect with that in whatever way you can, we really begin to sense deep peace and belonging, because we are truly never alone. We may also begin to feel a sense of purpose. And I like to say that I'm not sure we actually have a purpose in life, like a thing necessarily, a specific thing we do. But our purpose is to reconnect with who we are. Our purpose is to break through all those shields and be curious about life and live life and explore life and see all of life, what life has to offer us. Um, and it also can be overwhelming, but I sense that ultimately we are in control of how much we process and get at any one time. So, how do you deal with this phase in your life? Some people live their whole life in a state of awakening. I spent many years of my life in survival mode, so it really wasn't until 12 or 15 years ago where I started to ask these questions. And they started very subtly at first, of why am I really here? What is the point? It's kind of how it started. To the point now where my life is totally different than it was back then. And my sense of self is totally different. And it's exciting, and it can be frustrating to be human sometimes, but it's also, I also know that when we have practices in place, it can make this exploration of our consciousness go with a bit more ease. So, for example, my main base practices are meditation and mindfulness, and meditation as a practice of mindfulness, and journaling. Um, those are my go-tos. And in journaling is writing, and I also do creative practices for that. That is how I express and be with whatever is arising for me. I also spend a lot of time in nature. I walk a lot. I do a bit of yoga. Movement is also part of it, so that I connect back into my body and be out in nature and the earth. It's about giving ourselves space to listen to ourselves without the distractions, because there are so many distractions in this world. But being able to be comfortable with not knowing and being comfortable with being in the quiet. Um, so find those practices that work for you and try different things, because you might be surprised at what might resonate with you. I want to just throw a few questions out there for you to consider. These are great journaling prompts if you're a journaler. So have you noticed any changes in your body sensations, or your mind, your emotions, or even from a spiritual perspective that might signal to you that you're going through this stirring, this awakening? Um, and when you're going through times of change, when you feel a bit uncertain, how do you stay grounded? What is your practice for grounding? And then also, what practices may you have in place to connect more deeply with yourself, to really get to know who you are, and also the world around you? Now, there are no right or wrong answers to any of this, but just an opportunity for you to be curious about what might be coming up for you. So thank you for sitting with me. This question has been coming up a lot lately in some of the circles that I travel in. So I thought I'd spend a few minutes and just share with you some of my thoughts. And you can always contact me. You can subscribe to my channel here, as well as I go to my website. I do have the ability for you to sign up for emails and receive some of my my musings, so to speak, in email periodically. So thank you, and may your life unfold with ease.